Today I'm going to give you a crash course in musical notation. This is for those members of my choir who have no idea what's going on when they look at their sheet music and all they see is just a bunch of lines and dots running all over the page and it looks like Greek. I'm going to give you a little bit of background to help you understand a little bit more about what's going on. So, alright, if we go back to the beginning of time when people have been singing forever and a day, but they haven't been writing music down forever and a day. So to really simplify the story behind how music began to be written down, we'll just go back to the Middle Ages when the monks in their monasteries, they loved keeping records, they loved writing things down. They were the first, universities really, weren't they? The first people that started gathering things into libraries. So at some point, because they used to do all that beautiful sort of Gregorian chant type singing, they got the idea in their heads that it might be nice to have a means of writing the music down so that people could refer to it in the future to learn the songs, right? So anyway, this is my version of events, very simplified and maybe slightly erroneous, but anyway, so they came up with this idea of creating a scale of lines to represent the vocal range. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. There was one more. Okay, so this top line representing the upper echelons of the female vocal range, and down here being sort of the average depths of the male vocal range. And when they first started drawing the notes, they looked a bit different. They were sort of like this, and it was not the music that we see today. But the basic idea was that they began plotting on the lines how high or low they wanted the notes to be read, as in the pitch of the notes, as in low being la 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 la, high being la 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 la. So each line represented a certain distance. And so you can understand though that when people are starting to read these notes, there is just like so many lines and stuff going on here that it's kind of a nightmare to look at and to read. So at some point somebody had a brainwave and decided, look, let's just split the ledger, if you like, into two ranges. So we had the top 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines they kept, and the bottom 5 lines they kept, and that middle line they got rid of. And that middle line was the pitch that we now designate middle C, so we'll just keep that as an imaginary line. And then they said, okay, this can be like for the men to read, and this higher one can be for the women to read. Then they said, okay, now don't forget all of these they're all sort of they are actually inherently arbitrary, the pitch designations. But because we have been trained, our ears have been trained to most easily hear certain gaps. These were the gaps that were used in what became the familiar gaps in Western musical notation. Okay, so I'm probably not explaining this very well. Anyway, so they decided, okay, so this line here is going to be the note that sounds like middle C. I'm just making that note up because I haven't got reference to an instrument and I don't have perfect pitch. So we'll just say that's do, right? So they said, okay, this line that we took out can represent that pitch right there. That's probably a little bit low, actually. Somebody can check me. And then every line thereafter, well, actually the spaces represent notes as well. So you've got do, re, next line. Mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. So do, do. Those two do's are exactly what we now call an octave apart. Octave meaning 8 notes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And if you went down, do, ti, la, sol, fa, mi, re, do. So that would be low C down there. And you can keep going up, but once you get beyond the upper or lower line, you do the same thing as you do for the middle C's. You just start drawing lines and drawing the dots as you need, as required. So you can go higher than this range, obviously, and lower, and many musical instruments do go higher or lower, and some people can sing higher or lower. But these two staves were specifically written, I believe, with the vocal range in mind. Now, so that people could have a point of reference, they just indicated that this line here would always be G, a fifth above C. Do, re, mi, fa, sol. So they called it G. They gave them all letters of the alphabet. So you've got A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Okay, so G. And they actually wrote the letter G, but it was a fancy G, which eventually ended up looking like this. So when you see that treble clef at the beginning of the top stave, that's actually a G, and the line that runs through the middle of it, so that tells you that that note is G right there, G note. On the bottom, the note they referred to for reference, there are actually other clefs. These are called clefs, the soprano clef and the bass clef. There's an alto clef, there's a tenor clef, there's different clefs, and each one has a particular note as a point of reference. So the bass clef, they said, well, this is an F, which is, well, there's actually a fifth between an F and a C as well. Do, ti, la, sol, fa, C, B, C, B, A, and then you start the alphabet again. G, F, F, C, F, C, C, G. And the F was originally like this, right? Ended up looking like this with 2 dots. So that's the clef that you see now. Bass clef with the 2 dots. Used to be a letter F. So that tells you that that note that runs between those 2 dots is an F. Okay, so how to tell when you're singing, how to tell how far to jump when you're sight singing, and you can see that there's a note here, and then the next note you have to sing is here, so you have to sing an E, and then you have to sing a G. Well, you're like, well, how the heck am I supposed to know what that sounds like? Or the next, going from G to an A, well, how do I know what that gap sounds like? Okay, so when I was at school, as I was explaining to Lee the other day, they taught us how to hear the different intervals. So you start with your do, you put your do at C. It doesn't always have to be. You can have a movable do, but we'll just put do at C for the moment. And you learn that do, and then to the D, the next note, not the E. Do, re, do, re, do, re, do. You just learn what that gap sounds like. Do, re. So when you're going from one note to the next note are just a tone above. Do, re. You can always know that it's going to sound like do, re, do, re, do. There is actually a note between. If you're looking at a piano keyboard, you can see between the white note C and the white note D, there is a black note in between. Now we call that a C sharp or a D flat, depending if you're going down from the note onto the semitone below, or up from the note to the semitone above. Do, re, do, di, re, do. So you've got a what's called a half tone or a semitone in between that full tone. So to hear a semitone, if you're going, say I was going from a G to a G sharp, da, da, sa. So I was singing a G, G, and then I wanted to go just up a semitone to a G sharp. It would be like G, G sharp, and it sounds like Jaws if you sing them. Da 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 da. And it's the smallest gap that our ears comfortably hear. Of course, you can have smaller gaps, but they're a lot harder because our ears haven't been trained to hear them as much, so they're a lot harder for us to hear and sing. But you could do a quarter tone. Da, that would be a quarter tone. But we usually work with semitones. Da, 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 da. Okay? So that's what a semitone sounds like, and a tone. Do, re, do. Then you've got, if you jump from a line to a line or a space to a space, do, re, mi, do, mi, up to the, if you want to go one note above, there is actually only a semitone between these two. That's a little bit much to explain, but if you're familiar with the layout of a piano keyboard, you'll see that there's not black notes in between every white note. Some of the white notes don't have a black note between them, and that's the case with E to F, so that's only actually a semitone. Do, re, mi, fa, mi, fa, mi, fa. That's actually that Jaws da, 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 da sound. Do, fa, do, fa. So if I wanted to do a gap of a fourth, a frog went a walking on a summer's day, do, fa.
It is you.
Do, fa.
Hello.
Oh, somebody's come. Hang on a second. I'm gonna leave it, pause it. Alright, so just to continue, so each interval, each gap between notes has a name and has a particular sound. And if you can become familiar with those jumps, it makes it super easy, easier to sight read music, even if you don't play an instrument or refer to an instrument. But if you learn what the gaps sound like, it can make all the difference. So you've got do, re, do, mi, do, fa, do, so. This perfect fifth here, the jump from do to so, is an easy one because it sounds like twinkle, twinkle, little star, twinkle, twinkle. So if you ever have a jump from a line to 2 lines above, or from a space to 2 spaces above, it'll sound usually like twinkle, twinkle, depending on what note you're starting on. Twinkle, 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 twinkle. So you can hear that gap. Ha, 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 ha. That's the perfect fifth sound. Then you've got do, do. So you got do, so, la. My Bonnie lies over the ocean. My Bonnie lies over the sea. My bon. So you can hear that gap. That's called a sixth. My ba, ba, ba. And the next interval is an unusual one. You won't often hear this jump in music, but do, ti. If I sang from C to B, do, ti. And then you've got the octave. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, ti, la, so, fa, mi, re, do. And the same holds true for the bass clef and any clef you're working with as well. So that's just, it gives you a general idea of what is happening. So obviously, as you're moving up the lines and the spaces, your notes are getting higher. As you're going back, if you're going down, then your note's going to be lower. If you're going down from a space to a line, or a line to a space, you're only going to be going a tone, or sometimes a semitone, but usually a tone. So just that's like the next note down in your mind, the note that you would naturally just sing. If I said just sing one note, just go down one, then you can trust that you're going to probably land on it if you're going from a space to a line, or a line to a space. Just go down, think down one, and you'll probably hit it. So if you've got a line of music where your jumps are only pretty small, sometimes you can, if you keep the gap in your vocal jump small, it'll be close. But of course, as with anything in music, practice makes perfect. So the best thing to do is to listen to your part, hear it played, sing along, and then just keep practicing it over and over and over and over, and eventually it'll, it's almost like, it's like a muscle memory, isn't it? You'll just remember it. So that's your little crash course, guys. Hope that was slightly helpful. You know me, it's always a bit messy and chaotic, but I do my best.